All right, so today in class, you guys were exposed to the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is a way to solve quadratics, which is what we've been doing, the polynomials, trinomials specifically. It is a way to solve, to figure out where those zeros are or where they cross the x-axis. That's the whole point. So today in class, what we did, we not only we solved them, but we also used the graphing calculator so you could get the visual of where these points are coming from. So this formula says x equals negative b, so we're always going to take the negative of it, plus or minus, there should be a little minus sign down there, square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2a. And notice it's all over 2a, the entire thing, not just over here, not just what's under the square root. The entire thing is over the 2a. So we're going to work through a couple examples and see how this works. All right, example number 1. Now, one thing that I didn't put on that first screen is this right here, and we're going to talk about today. Ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. So now back in the day, whenever I taught Algebra 1, I always made my students write out what their a was, what their b was, and what their c was. So in this problem, my a is whatever is the first term, so the one that again, why I stressed for us to write it in descending order. So I'm only looking at the coefficient. I don't need that x squared. So my a value in this problem is 1. My b value, again, matching it up here. So my b value is going to be negative 7. And my c value right there is just simply 12. So notice I didn't have any x's in there. I just am taking the coefficients. The x's, yes, are a very important part of the problem. That determines what graph we're dealing with. But I'm only looking at the coefficients. So now I'm going to plug it in. And as you know, today in class, I sang you the song. I was like, x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So again, you see that the 2a is divided, everything on top is divided by it. So now I'm going to start plugging things in. So I have x is equal to negative 7 plus or minus square root negative 7 squared minus 4 times 1 times 12 all over 2 times 1. So again, I'm going to keep working through my math, like every step I'm going to work through math. So I have x is equal to, well, negative 7 is a positive 7, plus or minus square root, well, negative 7 squared is a positive 49, negative 4 times 12 is 48, and it's going to be minus all over 2. All right, so now I've just picked up exactly where we left off in the other one. So I'm going to keep going here, and I have x is equal to 7 plus or minus the square root of 1 over 2. So I'm going to go, at some point here, I'm going to go ahead and separate into two problems. I have x equals 7 plus the square root of 1 over 2, and I have x equals 7 minus the square root of 1 over 2. So again, I've got to do two problems. I'm going to get two values. So continue over here. This is just simply 7 plus 1, all divided by 2. So x equals 8 divided by 2, or 4. Over here, we have 7 minus 1 divided by 2. So x equals 6 divided by 2, or 3. Now, make sure when you write it not as in parentheses. You simply would write x equals 4, x equals 3 for your final answer. Okay? So again, we're just working through the steps, plugging things in their correct spots. That's the most common mistakes that I see students do on quadratic formula, is they don't put the positions in correctly. All right, so let's try another problem. So this one, we'll see if it's ugly or if it's clean. All right? So again, I'm going to write my x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And I always stress that all to make sure it's there. So again, I'm going to go ahead and say what my A value is, what my B value is, and what my C value is. So in this problem, my A value is 2 because it is the coefficient that's attached to that term right there. My B value is 4 because it is the coefficient that's attached to that X value. And my C value is a -5. So again, anytime you've got the negatives, the minus signs, make sure you bring those over. So now I'm going to start plugging things into the right places. So X equals -4 plus or minus square root of 4 squared minus 4 times 2 times -5 all over 2 times 2. So again, make sure that the part on the bottom, everything is over it. So I'm going to keep simplifying. -4 plus or minus square root. Well, I know 4 squared is 16. Now here, I'm going to go ahead and multiply these together, and I get -4 times 2 is -8. -8 times -5 is going to be a positive 48. All right? Yes. All over 4. Now again, I don't want to simplify anything at this point except for what's underneath that square root. So I'm going to keep going. So I'm going to have -4 plus or minus. What is 16 plus 48? Oh, this one's a really pretty problem. And honestly, I just made it up. Divide by 4. Well, let's continue to the next page. Alright, so I'm just continuing where I left off on the other page. So I have X equals -4 plus or minus 64. Well, as we talked in class today, we can do the square root of 64. Well, the square root of 64 is 8. So this comes down to, you have X equals -4 plus 8 over 4, and you have X equals -4 minus 8 over 4. So again, you've got to separate it into two problems. And so here we have X is equal to, well, -4 plus 8 is 4 over 4, or 1. And over here we have X is equal to -12 over 4, or -3. So my final answer would be X equals 1, X equals -3. And again, if we graph this, we're going to see that this is where my graph crosses the x-axis. That's why I'm finding the zeros, because it's where X equals 0. Alright, so sometimes they don't look ready for you to start the quadratic formula. So you need to make sure that everything is on the same side together and that it's set equal to 0. So the first couple examples, that was already done for you, but I definitely want to cover some where it's not done for you. So that means my first step here, I need to add this 4x to the other side. So now my equation is going to look like 3x squared plus 4x plus 16 is equal to 0. Placement is very important here. Again, that's why we stressed order and making sure things were in the right order. So again, I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, well, my A value is 3 because the coefficient of my x squared is a 3. My B value equals 4 because my coefficient of that x, now that I moved it, see, he wasn't negative, but I had to move him so it became positive, is the 4. And then my C value is equal to 16. All right, because again, he's the one that's sitting there that has nothing, okay? No coefficients, or I mean, he has the coefficients, no x values. So now I'm going to go in and I'm going to play the quadratic formula game. So I've got x equals -b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So again, step 1 is just plugging things in to their correct locations. So I get -4 plus or minus, and we'll see how this one turns out, because the second example and third example, I just made up on the spot. My b value is at 4, so 4 squared, probably should put parentheses, minus 4 times 3 times 16, all over 2 times 3. Ooh, I see something happening here. And this good example is you, and I'll do another example after this. But if you notice, I have -4 plus or minus. I'm going to have 16 minus, what is 4 times 3 times 16, 192. Now, I'll make it on the next slide. All right, so let's continue this problem, and we're gonna see that something's wrong with this one. So negative 4 plus or minus square root. Well, what is 16 minus 192? It's negative 176. Now here's the deal. If you get a negative under the square root, you can't do it because it is what is called an imaginary number. What that means for this means that this graph does not cross the x-axis. It never crosses the x-axis. You're done with this problem, okay, at this stage in the game. In Algebra 2, we'll take it farther. You'll simplify things down. But right now, you'd probably write does not cross x-axis. So now, there's not a lot of problems at this stage in Algebra 1 that have a negative under the square root because we make them clean. And we make them clean on purpose so that you can learn the quadratic formula. However, if you legit get a negative underneath there, and I don't think you should today, but if you legit get a negative underneath there, you can finish and you can say it does not cross the x-axis because it will not. If we went and graphed this equation, you would see it doesn't cross the x-axis. Let's do one more problem. All right, so we'll do one more problem here. So this problem says 3x squared plus 4x equals 10. So again, our very first step is to go ahead and subtract this 10 to both sides. So our equation is actually 3x squared plus 4x minus 10 equals 0. So again, I've got to solve it for 0. I have to have everything there on the same side. So again here, I'm going to say, well, my a is 3 because it's the coefficient of the x squared. My b is 4 because it's the coefficient of the x, or the second term. And my c is a negative 10. So now I'm going to go ahead and write down my quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So again, I start plugging things in their appropriate places. So x equals negative 4 plus or minus square root 4 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 10 all over 2 times 3. So again, I'm just going to keep plugging and chugging the math here. So x equals negative 4 plus or minus square root 16. Well, 4 times 3 times 10 is going to give me a plus 120 all over 6. I'm going to go ahead and simplify that. X equals negative 4 plus or minus square root of 136 all over 6. All right, so now I need to find the square root of 136. So here we go. Now we're jumping into a decimal. Now my deal is round to the nearest hundredth. So 2 to the right of the decimal. So we're going to get negative 4 plus or minus 11.66 over 6, which means I have x equals negative 4 plus 11.66 divided by 6, and I have x equals negative 4 minus 11.66, all divided by 6. All right. So now it's a calculator thing. Now, remember, if you're typing this into the calculator will go in the order you put it in there. So I highly recommend put parentheses around this if you're going to try to do it at the same time. So you would type in, I'll just write that, x equals parentheses negative 4 plus 11.66 divided by 6. When you do that, you get 1.28 when I round it. And then over here, I have x is equal to this, which gives you negative 2.61. So your two answers here are 1.28 and x equals negative 2.61. So again, I think this covers it pretty well. Of course, if you're having struggles, come into Math Lab and ask questions, because I know this is new, but you're plugging in things. All right, good luck.